My guest this week is Sir Ray Avery. He's an inventor, a philanthropist, and a scientist who grew up on the streets of London in orphanages and under railway bridges. Years down the track, he was knighted for saving millions of lives through medical technology. In this episode, Sir Ray will share with you the exact frameworks that he uses to survive with everything that is going on in his business, especially when things go wrong, because it will go wrong. And in 50 years of entrepreneurship, the one thing that he learned will be passed down to you. The only question is, will you be ready? Are you ready for this episode? My name is Mina Amso, and this is Note from the Executive Podcast. Quick one, Mina here. Thank you for watching this episode. I appreciate you. Thank you for all your support. One thing that you can do for me is to please hit the subscribe button below. I promise you that if you hit subscribe, I'm going to work hard to make sure that my episodes are really good, that will get better and better. So, do we have a deal? Okay, back to the episode. Sir Ray Avery, welcome to the podcast. You are an incredible human on many levels. Just because you've worked hard to work on yourself, being a scientist, inventor, an entrepreneurial philanthropist. You've won countless awards, and I've noticed that some people who you've done interviews with have actually listed the awards that you have had, and I will list them to give people context of the grandiosity of yourself. So you have been named Kiwi Bank New Zealander of the Year in 2010. The Sir Peter Blake Leadership Medal 2010. You've been named Reader's Digest's Most Trusted Person in New Zealand and the EY Social Entrepreneur of the Year. And of course, the grandiose one is you've been knighted as a Grand Companion of the New Zealand Order of Merit in 2011. So that's why we call you Sir. It's a massive recognition of your contribution to medicine and to science. When you hear all of that, I'm sure you hear it so many times. What do you think? What comes to your mind when you hear all of that?
Well, I probably haven't done enough. I think there's still a lot more things that I'd like to do, and I hope I live long enough to see some of them come to fruition. I think, and that's all embedded in my background and being, beaten unconscious by my mother, put into orphanages, and they were terrible places of physical, mental, sexual abuse for another 7 years. I ran away and set up shop under the railway bridge in London. I had a small tent, and then I'd go to the library and read things, and started educating myself with reading the Encyclopedia Britannica, which is a bit like Google of today. And so when I had a chance to do some good, I felt, well, one of the reasons for running away from the orphanage was my best friend was being abused in the bed next to me, and I convinced him that we should go and see the teachers and tell them what was going on, and that would stop. So we went to see the teacher, and the teacher said, he's actually quite a good teacher and he won't do it again. But then he turned to being quite violent with my friend, and he hung himself in the toilets. And I've struggled with that all my life, in the sense that did I do the wrong thing? Did I actually contribute to that thing? But what I can do is actually live on his behalf and live on the behalf of all those other kids that didn't get a chance at life. So that's my responsibility. And I often talk to people about, what is it that makes people smart? Is it that they are naturally smart? Or is it like a nature thing that they're born naturally smart, or does the nurture that they're given make them better? And the truth is, it's both. Muhammad Ali was a great athlete, but if he hadn't had mentorship, he wouldn't have been the person that he was today. And so I was extraordinarily lucky to be taken off the streets of London. I was on living under the railway bridge, and I got cut my leg, it got infected, I got blood poisoning, and I fell into a sort of coma on the train. I used to go to the train because you could keep warm, I could do my washing of Mondays in the little hot sink that they had there. And I could dry them on the air conditioning unit below me. And I'd go backwards and forwards from London to Dover, and I'd read books because I was living on the streets of London. Or I'd go to the library. But in one of those situations, I fell unconscious of blood poisoning, ended up in hospital. And before me was a guy called Jack Wise, and he was a teacher actually, but he had a social working practice as well, and he would take kids that were taken out of police environments, and he set up a prototype school in South England, which was called 4RH, which was part of the Y Agricultural Research Centre. That's the Oxford and Cambridge of agricultural research. And he had all these young kids like me going there, propagating plants and doing things. So he gave me a choice. He said, Ray, you've run away from the orphanage so many times, you're probably going to go to Borstal. And it's this prison for young kids. He said, or you can come down to the south coast to me, do this internship, and it's like Borstal with grass. And I said, I'll do that. So I ended up at Y College, and at Y College, these guys were all Battle of Britain pilots. They shook hands every morning when they came to work. They had bow ties, and then they put the lab coats on over the top of that. And they all spoke with immaculate radar accents, absolutely impeccable men. It was like Brideshead Revisited. I was under the railway bridge. Now I was with these guys. And they said, good Lord, Ray, you can't talk properly. No idea what breed, what it's white. We'll educate you. You need to go to dance classes and learn bridge. You can't go on like this, Ray. And so they changed me. They made me me. And I loved it because I started talking with a radar accent. They took me up to London. It was the last somewhere in a shop a shoe shop in one of the most famous streets for fashion in London, and they got shirts made for me and so on. So they made Mr. Ray. They say, young Ray, we've got to fix you, and they did. And I have to pay that forward as well. I've got to pay that forward for them. It wasn't all good in the sense that I hadn't had any love in my life at all. My mother had beaten me unconscious, and there was certainly no love in the orphanages. And so giving all of these avuncular skills, and I had a sports car at that stage, to a young guy just coming into the sort of 16 and 17 in the 1960s, I kind of abused a lot of that knowledge and went out on a kind of... I had at any given time, I might have had 6 or 7 girlfriends at the same time in different parts of the country. And I was looking for love, but it didn't make me happy. But I did, I think, to some degree, pay forward what those wonderful guys, we'd have these picnics on the lawn at lunchtime with the best brie and the best wine. And so they taught me a lot of things about how to get in life. And that was very useful I set up some business in England, laboratories for testing chemicals and drugs and so on. And I became quite successful. I wouldn't have been able to do that if I couldn't talk properly or didn't dress properly and look like I was rich, even though I wasn't at the beginning,
Wow. What a great oversight of all of your life stories. And so you did live in London for a while before you moved in here. And what made you move to New Zealand? Why New Zealand?
Well, it wasn't... well, it's a very good question in the sense of how your life is motivated by one single event. And what had happened was I had a laboratory in London, one in Canterbury and one in Dover, because Dover was where all the ships came in, and there was certain rules about importing things like rum, which you had to have an alcohol content. So we did all the work for the local shipping companies in Dover and in Canterbury, and then we had milk companies in Canterbury, and then in London we had water testing contracts. So I had really quite a good business, but I would drive backwards and forwards, and what would happen is I'd end up having a girlfriend in London, then a girlfriend in Dover, and a girlfriend in Canterbury. And I hated, because of all the things that had happened to me, I hated women being upset, so I never broke up with them. I didn't like them crying, but they accumulated over a decade. It was a nightmare. It was absolutely a nightmare. And what had happened was I was driving around on my motorbike in London, and I'd taken to driving the motorbike to get around to my appointments faster. and some idiot put a roundabout in the middle of the road when there wasn't one when I went to work, and the local farmers down the road had stolen all the little lights for their sheds, and so I didn't see it, and I hit it at about 80 kilometres an hour and broke every bone in the left-hand side of my body, tibia, fibia, femur. I was in hospital 3 months with my arm in plaster and my leg in plaster, and that was enough time for all those women to find me at the same time. and they weren't happy. I thought I might get a sympathy for broke down, but there was going to be none of that. And that's when I realised that the other configuration that was significant was the miners were on strike, and I was cooking my Christmas dinner on a gas stove in a luxury apartment, and I thought there's got to be a better place to live than this, and so I decided to sell up everything, and to some degree I was running away from all of those relations. I didn't know how to end those relationships because I didn't want them to cry, but there was some it was like digging a mass grave. If I could do it all at the same time and leave and just say goodbye to all of them. And so I did. So I picked up everything, and I didn't know where I was going. I had a backpack and a lot of money in my pocket, and I decided to explore the world. And to some degree, the man that you see before you is a product of that journey, because I'd never seen poverty up front personally in my life. But when I was going through India, Pakistan, and all the third world countries, I could see there was a great need for some help. But at that time, I didn't have the skills to do it, but I could see it. So I was hitchhiking, and I got into Munich, and I was staying in a very cheap hotel. And across the road, there was a bus that came to park, and it was called Swagman Overland, and it had about 35 Australian New Zealand peoples. Australians were coming back to Australia, and the Kiwis were going on an adventure, whatever. And so they were there the next day, and they shouldn't have been, because it was a hope. It was just a lay-by. There was nothing to do there. And I went and spoke to them, and they said, well, look, we went to a big booze up last night at the beer festival, and the drivers went away with the wife of one of the passengers, so we got no driver. We got a backup driver, which they had to legally have. And he said, can you drive a bus? And I said, well, I got a heavy goods vehicle licence because of all the work that I was doing and stuff. And he said, well, I'll give you 20 quid a week to drive this bus to Kathmandu. So he did. It was a 3-month overland trip that took 11 months. Because the bus broke down so many times. People got married on the bus. People got venereal disease on the bus. It was a nightmare, because I was the doctor as well, because I was a bit medically orientated. So they'd come to me with all sorts of things that were going wrong with them, but I got them all there in the end. So I didn't have an agenda for coming to New Zealand. I just ran out of land. And so I arrived in New Zealand in 1973. And house prices were going up, so I bought a few houses and started to renovate them. And that was another skill, because I learnt carpentry and so on. And I had I worked at the university at that time, setting up the Department of Clinical Pharmacology. That was a challenging thing to actually set up a new teaching school for pharmacology, because they didn't have one previously. It was a lot of fun, because I said to the professor at that time, have we got a curriculum for this? And he said, no. I said, what's the best curriculum for teaching pharmacology in the whole wide world? He said, University of Edinburgh. I said, well, let's steal theirs, and we'll just adapt it. And we did. So one of the experiments to show how anaesthetics work was to get, this was the experiment in Scotland, and it had take a 4-pound salmon, put it into a tank and fill it with clean water, then put in the anaesthetic and time the concentration and the time that it takes for the fish to recover. So you put in the anaesthetic, it goes to sleep. Half an hour later it wakes up. It's effluxed out all the anaesthetic and it wakes up. That's ideal, of course. That's what happens in operations. So we couldn't afford to do that with a 3-pound salmon with 200 students. So I went to the local shop. It's called Honeywood Fish, whatever shop, and we got 500 orange guppies. They're little tiny fish this big. Now what you have to do is get the calculation for the anaesthetic right, because if you get it wrong, they're all going to die. They won't recover. So I just did the body weight of 3 pounds of big fish to this little tiny thing, which is about 3 grams. So 1,000 times, did the calculation. We did it, and they all died. Well, at least we thought they did. What happened was they all died, and I said, well, we can't have the ethics committee seeing we do all this stuff with these fish. So I said, put them down the toilet and flush them, they'll be fine. So we put them down the toilet and flush them. And that went perfectly for about an hour or so. And then there was a screaming coming from the female toilets because they'd woken up and they were just... the girls were going... So,
oh my gosh!
So we had a lot of fun setting it up, and it was certainly a precursor to me becoming the technical director of Douglas Pharmaceuticals, which started a whole new part of my career because I was learning about manufacturing drugs. I'd learned a lot about drug trials and so on. That's how we got to be part of Douglas, because I was doing clinical trials for them as well as other international companies, and so we put that together. And after I think I personally oversaw about 160 different generic drug presentations being formulated, and also things like the Caratani infant formula. So I learned about nutrition. But after 7 years of doing that, I was doing the same thing, you know. And my idea was to take that knowledge base and take it to the third world, because I knew now how to make drugs very quickly and cheaply. And if I could partner with some drug companies in Africa and Asia, I could actually have, at scale, get these people to have better drugs at a lower price. And so I spent the next decade, you know, really focusing on that, you know, and building nutrition plants in different parts of the world. And then I met the fabulous Fred Hollows, and he was coming back to New Zealand. He was dying of cancer, saying goodbye to all his family. I thought it was a whiskey convention because they'd all bought a bottle of whiskey for Fred. I went into the room and all these bottles of whiskey. Everywhere there's whiskey. And a guy that knew me at the university said, this is Ray Avery. He's an expert in building pharmaceutical medical device plants. He could help you, Fred, with this laboratory in Africa, which is in Eritrea. You know, he can help you with that. And Fred was typically Fred. He said, yeah, but is the bastard any bloody good? And then he walked off into the crowd. And I've always, you know, I'm not saying that Fred was a bully, but in that instance he acted like a bully. And so I went after him, grabbed him by the arm, and I said, Fred, you're dying of cancer. I charge about $5,000 an hour for consultancy. Do you want to talk to me or not? And he grabbed my arm and he said, I love this guy. Give him a whiskey. And then the next week I was in Randwick in his house, planning how to build the factory in Eritrea, and talking to your thing about this resilience thing. Whilst I have a natural resilience, this is the best advice I can give to any listeners about starting any business. Well, the first thing is to start. Then the next thing you do is to do the risk analysis. So in the pharmaceutical industry, we do a thing called failure mode cause risk analysis, which really means what the fuck can go wrong, you know, what can go wrong, and then you mitigate that. You come up with all these solutions. And so every disaster that I've ever had in my life has been a result of either failing to do a complete failure mode risk analysis, or mostly the unforeseen events which you can't necessarily mitigate by having that failure mode cause risk analysis. I'll give you a very practical example. We were building the first plant in Eritrea, and we shipped over by sea these lathes, which cost about $500,000 each. These are the ones to automatically make lenses very cheaply. So I patented that technology, and then I gave that technology to the Fred Hollows Foundation, and my job was to install it in the factory and make it all work. So we shipped it by sea, and of course there's a lot of water around when there's in the sea. And so what we did, we packed these crates internally with lots and lots of polythene bags around everything. We had silica gel to make sure that any moisture that did build up through changes in temperature within the thing, and it was all bulletproof. We'd done everything about failure mode cause risk analysis. No risk of these being harmed in transportation. Brilliant. Next thing that was, they got to Nepal, and the customs guys in Nepal took the lids off to make sure what was in them, and opened up the polythene to just check everything. And then they just left it like that in the middle of a field for a month or so. And the rains came and it filled up the whole container. So these things were ruined, absolutely ruined. So we had to ship them back by sea to Sydney and then repair them all. And so this time what we had was our team on the ground with those guys when they're inspecting things. But we couldn't have foreseen that set of circumstances. But what we did, we learned from that, and we had our people help them inspect the goods. And of course they were under the gun because they'd ruined it all, before. But then the next thing that happened was we had built the factory, and the king was coming to open the factory. People would have travelled all over the world to be there. It was a great success story, in the poorest country in the world, making an ISO 1348 certified quality lens manufacturing facility. We had to train everybody to build the place. And so we were all excited for the opening day. We had 3 days before it opened. My guys were now lolling around the Radisson Hotel pool. They'd done their work, and so we're all very happy. And then later that night, on the first lay days that we had, somebody knocked on my door in the middle of the night and said, Ray, Mr. Ray, wake up, factory gone. What do you mean factory gone? You can't lose a factory. And when we got there, what had happened is some of the Nepalese contractors had taken off the air conditioning units, vents at the top, and hadn't put them back. They were inspecting something. So the rains came, filled up all the ceiling space, and collapsed the ceilings all over the whole lot of the lathes. And the whole rooms were really completely buggered. And so I had to make a decision about what we did, because there were so many people coming for this opening from overseas. We couldn't just say it's not happening. So I said, the best thing we can do, guys, I had all my team around me, I said, the best thing we can do is to do one room. We'll just fix one room. We've got enough time in 3 days to fix one room. And then that will show them that's what it would look like when it's done. And that's the best we can do. So we worked non-stop for 24 hours and did that first room. So by the end of day one, we'd done that room. And we had all our guys still tired. They hadn't slept. They were covered in plaster and dust and stuff. And the Australian ambassador appeared, and he bought a crate of Jim Beam whiskey with him and dropped it down on the floor. Now Vinyl, we don't know what his name is, and he doesn't know anymore because he's got so much solvent from laying vinyl. Vinyl said to me, if I'd have known you'd be able to do this, Australian, I ought to have done the whole bloody lot, And I said, well, why don't we? We'll do the whole lot. And we worked for 3 days with no sleep. And we got it all done. If you had gone into that last room on the day that it opened, the ceiling would have still been wet, but it looked beautiful.
Wow.
And, I remember driving back in a truck to get changed to go to the opening. And I've never been so happy in my life, because it was like something like Gallipoli. These guys had done everything, and we'd done it. And we won.
Quick one. My friends at Academy X know exactly how it feels. AI is moving fast, and you're busy at work, it's hard to know what's worth your time, and you're feeling the pressure. That's why they created the Master of Technological Futures. It's a part-time, project-based course built for professionals who don't want another course that is full of theory. It's for entrepreneurs driving change inside organizations, for entrepreneurs building their own thing, and mid-career leaders who want to stay relevant. One thing that you'll actually walk away with is a clear, practical action plan that you can put straight into your work. Plus, you'll get one-on-one advisor support and the backing of a cohort of leaders going through it with you. Why not check it out? The next intake starts 30th of October and applications are closing soon. Click the link in the description and apply today. Okay, back to the episode. I want to get advice from you.
Yeah.
There's so much richness in your life and your accomplishments. So you were talking a little bit about resilience and starting and testing, seeing what the risks are, what could really possibly go wrong. So the people who are listening are people who, guys and girls wanting to start a business, want to be inspired in their journeys and their careers, and perhaps you're going through something difficult. And I suppose is when you go through something difficult, is when you really need that really good sound advice of somebody who's gone before. It's almost like a mentor. So we can assume that this is almost like a mentor session. Yeah. Imagine that I am the thousands of people who could be listening. Yeah. And if I'm someone who's listening going, I'm going through a really tough time in my business, or in my, you just touched on a challenge of your business and how you came out of it. Started a business and it's not going so well. There's just so much challenges in there, and cash flow is out of whack, and all that rest of it. How would you even, what's your advice?
Well, I think the important part of that is that you do need advice. You do need mentorship. You can't do it all on your own. And so that's the first thing I would do is find some wingmen around you that can support you in this journey. And that's very, very important because if your wingmen walk away from, say, a business when the cash flow is not looking good, they can take your business down if they're shareholders or something like that. So you've got to have a backstop somewhere and put enough resilience in the business, whether that's having enough a backup cash flow or something like that. And pivoting is also important. The ability to pivot when something goes wrong, because there will always be problems that are unforeseen, like COVID, for instance. That stopped a lot of business from being able to do export products. That was completely unforeseen. And you've seen huge numbers of business go into receivership, and particularly in things like the hospitality industry in New Zealand, because we don't have the tourist numbers, and people are also cash poor because of the cost of living crisis and so on. So what's happened typically with a lot of those companies, you don't see the initial problem. You see it 3 years typically after, when everybody puts their life savings in to try and keep the company alive long enough to be successful. And that's often what's happening in every startup company, and it happens with even large companies. So Allbirds, for instance, who make these slippers that are made of natural materials and so on, and they came out boxing really great 4 or 5 years ago, but they've been cash burning ever since, and they've run out of Plan C funding, and so that's the problem. So what you've got to try and do is have enough fat in the system that you can try and mitigate any of those problems that are coming up. But certainly the most important thing is to find a wingman, or at least 2 or 3 wingmen that believe in the dream. And this is about team building as well. So your team, just as I've said with what we did in Eritrea, fixing a problem, I build teams. That's why I'm successful. My team, whoever they might be and what part of the business, my X factor. They've been encultured into it. So we're like a team of Navy SEALs. What happens? In Eritrea, we had a air conditioning unit blow up, and we couldn't operate the lathes because they had to be at a certain temperature. And so my team came to me and said, look, it's all blown up. And I said, well, what's the fault? And they said, well, the little solenoid probably costing about $6. But I said, well, where can I get one from? I said, well, you need to get one from Germany. That's what this machine was made, so it'll probably take about 3 weeks. And I said, we can't wait 3 weeks for that. There must be something else. And so I said, is it really not fixable? And Stephen Murphy, who's an Australian guy there, was an engineer. He said, yeah, Ray, it's fucked, proper fucked. And I said, well, Stephen, Stumpy, okay, it's fucked, it's proper fucked. So how are we going to fix it? And that changes everything. That changes the argument. So 70% of our brain is naturally conditioned to see the negative side of things and not think around the problem or come up with a pivoting thing. So I said, there must be something. Maybe we could get, from one of the hotels, we could see if we could buy one of their air conditioning units. If it's got anything like the right solenoid, we can or capacitor. And one of the guys said, well, tanks have them. I said, well, shit, we've got a tank graveyard out there. So we went round to the tank graveyard, got it and fixed it. So it's that lateral thinking. But again, the team would start. When I was in the pharmaceutical industry and something had gone wrong, I would give them a bit of a seeing to, but in a nice way, because something had gone wrong which was preventable. Because this is a good example. I made a team that would do Congo dances whenever we got a formulation finished. Everybody would do a Congo dance around the factory floor. And my team, unfortunately, got my kind of nature for being a bit tricky and having fun with what we're doing. So we had an inspector who would come round and certify our factory for good manufacturing practice standards. And he would come from Australia to give us our certification for the TDA. And one of the guys, we had a big machine that was for powder coating capsules, but basically put sugar coating so they don't taste terrible. And it's like a big washing machine, and you throw in the tablets and it sprays sugar material all over the capsules. Brilliant. So one of the guys thought it'd be good, because this guy was going to inspect this machine. So he got a toy rat, a little furry toy rat, and put it into the machine to be a bit of a joke for the inspector. Sadly, he forgot to take it out, and it ruined about $25,000 worth of tablets. And, so that's a mistake that was preventable. So I would call them in that kind of situation and say, gentlemen, it's not my nature to be brutal and be offensive, but we need to get better at this stuff, and so it'd be a nice gentle bollocking. And so what they would do with me when they were trying to take the piss out of me, and when they were giving their reports about things, they would say, gentlemen, it's not my... so they could get their own back. And I think that's the thing. You can do wonderful things if people believe in something, and there's a passion about what you're trying to achieve, and you know what you're trying to achieve. So that's the other part about the business thing is, look at the business that you're in. This is the most important thing I can give you under that landscape. Who is the customer? Who is the real customer for the product? And often you'll find there actually isn't one. There isn't one. You think there's one, but there actually isn't when you actually drill down to what's going on here. And so people create customers in their head and say, there is a market for whatever that product is. There was a guy I know who decided that he could make a fortune by blow moulding a little kind of plastic box that you could put onto your tow bar, and it would make an extra boot, so you could take extra stuff in the back of your car. And he went to one of the agricultural shows, and a lot of people said, yeah, we like it, and so he invested a lot of money in it, and he didn't sell a single one because that wasn't the right trial, and it wasn't possibly even the right customer base. But the reality was the people that would need this probably had a ute anyway, and they didn't want to have a thing stuck on the back, and you couldn't open your own boot while it was on there, and you had to buy a tow bar as well. So all of the things that he thought were good about it turned out to be not correct. And so you've got to think about that. Yeah, so that's the most important thing, is we call it determination of customer statement of need.
Yep.
And so you do all the analysis around that as deep as you can, and also then think about a pivot. I mean, sometimes a good example of that is that the watch that we use for protecting women in the family violence situation was originally designed for monitoring patients in rest homes across the globe. When we started up, we had one company that had 40,000 customers across Australia and New Zealand, and that's why we actually invested in the time in doing the software development for that industry. And then we had a partner which was guaranteeing that we would have those 40,000 customers. And what happened was, without any knowledge to us, they sold that part of the business to a third-party supplier who was providing something like we were providing. So we ended up with no customers. So we had to pivot very quickly and say, who are the other people that might want one of these devices? And so then we started to get in the lone worker space, and so that people who are working remotely could set an alarm off. And then what happened was somebody came to us from one of the family violence agencies and says, surely you can make something for us. So then we got all our software guys together and made something that's particularly curated for protecting women and children that are in part of family violence situations. And that software is being expanded into how we can improve the service for these people and track and trace. So we can track and trace these people anywhere they go, and so even if they were abducted, we can find them. So it's about all of those things, the ability to pivot and make sure that you really have thought about. First thing is make sure there is a real customer, and then the next thing is look at the competition and what have they got that they could leverage over you. And so what's your point of difference? What's your magic sauce,
I want to know if if you had nothing right now, like if tomorrow you lost your money, your contacts, your recognition, your reputation, how would you rebuild it?
Well, I've been there, I guess, in terms of living on the streets of London and not even any money in my pocket. So I'd be quite happy if I lost everything, I could survive. I mean, I could actually start again.
How?
Well, the first thing is I'm assuming you got no money. That's the first thing. So how do you get money out of nothing? So what you do is you kind of pivot and say, I'm not, might even be just approaching somebody in a cafe and saying, I'm not going to ask you for money because I'm a beggar. But what I'll do for you is I'll give you a consultation about whatever that thing is, or what business are you in, and I'll give you some advice. And if you don't think the advice is anything, you don't have to give me anything. And then you do that. So then you don't. When you get to the next level, you don't work on commission at all. I get a retainer, which means you've got to get guaranteed income going forwards. So you use all the skills that you know to actually get to where you want to go. And reputation is a bit. The problem in New Zealand with reputation is that we've got a tall poppy syndrome. So we don't like people who show off too much, and that's why, sadly, one of my proteges, Sir Jake Miller, committed suicide because he was vilified by the media. And then you've got a Nano Girl, and she's just been picked on by the media because her company that was doing great work with schools around New Zealand went into receivership because of COVID. So she's done nothing wrong, but the press doesn't like, and we had the same thing when we were, again, I did all the failure mode course risk analysis. We had all our incubators in India certified to ISO 135. The Indian manufacturer we have there produces incubators for the UK and United States of America. So they're a very reputable manufacturer. And we've got all these pictures of them, proudly standing with all the incubators lined up. Mm-hmm. We had to test them in the hospitals in India because there's power fluctuations, there's no temperature control. All the incubators that are made in the first world are designed to work in an air-conditioned room. And if you go to Fiji, you'll find rooms full of broken incubators. They're not designed to work there. So we jumped over that and said, we'll make one that's cheap, that does work in those countries. And we validated all of that. And then I wanted to do something really large. So based on my reputation and the fact we had the incubators on board, we were going to put on a concert at Eden Park. So we had Phil Collins lined up, Neil Finn, and a number of other people. And it was going to be a great success. We wanted to do a telethon. We had TV signed up, and we got everything ready to do that. And then, because my thesis was that nobody would say no to putting on a concert at Eden Park, even though the local residents authority didn't want concerts because of the noise that it would create. So I said to myself, no, they won't do that. Could not on just one day to save millions of kids around the world. But what happened was Helen Clark went lobbying and got so many oppositions to the concert because of the noise, and the concert was shut down. So we had no concert. But then worse than that, Helen Clark was beaten up a little bit by the media from the public backlash. So she defended herself by saying the incubators are third world incubators. They're all being tested in India on third world babies. So, so you have all of that kind of things that you couldn't predict.
Is that when she was the Prime Minister or
yeah,
not?
No, she wasn't the Prime Minister at that time. She had resigned. But oddly enough, she fronted an organisation in the USA, which is particularly for looking after young mothers and children. So it didn't make any sense. But thankfully now the concerts have been started up. Helen Clark again put in objections to their second application, and thankfully they got that through, and so there now are routine concerts at Eden Park. But for us, again, the timing was bad because COVID hit, and our manufacturer in India switched manufacturing for all of their incubators to making respirators. You can understand why, because there was a world shortage of respirators for cancer patients. So for the last 2 or 3 years, they've been making that. And now we're just coming out of the back end of that, where we're back on to making incubators. So all of these things, are things you can't foresee, and what you do is you just pivot. I mean,
I want to ask you about the incubators and about the drip
yeah.
controller. What's it called? Acuset?
Yeah.
Yeah. So there was a real interesting, like that would have been a business challenge that you would have gone across. And there's been a lot of back and forth in the media about what you said, what has been found. And there was a study done at Auckland University around the use of the drips. If you may explain it really easily to people who are watching and listening, just so that they understand what this product that you were trying to design. And this is separate from the incubator, the life pod.
Yeah. So we one of the things that happens when we were building cancer hospitals in Nepal, kids were dying, particularly kids, because they were being administered too much chemo drugs. They're very toxic. And so, if you do, and the way that they would normally administer those drugs was with a simple IV flow controller, which is called a drip set, and basically it's a little roller clamp that clamps onto the plastic tubing, compressing it, and if you switch it right off, it'll just stop. You open it up a little bit, and it'll increase the flow. And so the problem was that these things were so inaccurate that sometimes they go to a thing called free flow, and when the temperature changes, they just flick open. So the first alert I got from that was they would make the drugs themselves in their clean room environment. And then I would go out into the wards and I'd see all of these drip sets, and there'd be, all of them would look about the same level, and then there'd be two that were way lower. So, they've actually just pretty much gone to free flow, and those kids died. So there had to be a better way. So I came up with a thing called the Acuset controller, and that's a device which uses a totally different compression system. So we have our own drip set, and that only fits our particular device. But that drip set doesn't suffer from this thing called cold flow creep, which means that the thing can flip open. Plus it's got a dial, so you can actually dial up the flow rate. You're not guessing, you actually dial up a flow rate. So it was a game changer, and it's being used in cancer hospitals as we speak in Nepal. But what happened was, I was interested to see what the market was in developed country settings for the product. What had happened is we had been using it in Vietnam and with the Baxter company, and Baxter found out that it had improved safety and reliability compared with the normal devices. So they wanted us to patent it in pretty much every developing country, which we did. And then Americans got ahead of it, and they said, we want to do it as well. So we did another trial and all of those things were very positive. What I wanted to do was to see what the benefits of this device was in the first world setting. So a professor at the University of Auckland, I asked him to do the time that it took to set up an IV drip set to get a normal drip set to get an accurate, say, of 10 drops a minute, which is a low dose for things like chemo drugs, compared with the Acuset. What was the time difference? Mm-hmm. And that was the only thing that we were wanting them to do. And so we gave them both devices, the drip set plus our device. And then what happened was they said, yes, it is. It's much better. But what they did, without asking us, was they tried to measure the accuracy of these two devices in a study of their own. The problem was that when they tried to do that, they mislaid the proper drip set and used the standard drip set. So it wasn't even our product they tested. And so the paper was finally republished with an addendum saying it's not the Acuset device that we tested. But what happened was the media wanted to make mileage out of it and say that it didn't work. It does work. And of course we've got documents from Baxter Healthcare, and it's significant that the particular clinician also was on national television saying that the COVID was spread by hand-to-face touching. And that's the principal route because he was trying to promote a device that would give you a shock if you put your hands to your mouth, and it would stop you from doing it. And of course, that's a complete madness, but it shows the quality of this guy in terms of stuff.
So there was a testing happening in Auckland University of your product.
Yeah.
And
Well, not my product.
not your product.
Wasn't my product. Wasn't our
It
product.
wasn't. And there was testing happening in India of the product. Or was there no testing happening in India, the product?
What do you mean? No,
Of the set.
The normal drip set is inaccurate and causes problems with people getting overdoses because it's just a very crude device that compresses the tubing. And if you get a change in temperature, that can actually just release, and then you've got all the chemo drugs going into that person in an hour rather than 24 hours. So we fixed that because this thing can't do that, but it needs our drip set to make that happen, and it needs our controller. So the study that was done by the University of Auckland was not our device. It was a mishmash of two bits of technology that they put together. And so then it was when the publisher made them do an addendum to say it wasn't the Acuset device that was tested. So, but too late really in terms of fundraising, because we were...
because how did that impact?
Well, we had about 6 funders in New Zealand all ready to rock and go for about $20 million, and they all walked away once Eloise Gibson's story came out saying it didn't work. And our board themselves said we need to park it for certain to let it all die down, because at that stage we didn't have the rebuttal from the Cambridge University Press, but it was, we could have sued them, but we'd need money to do that. We didn't have any money in that business, so we parked the commercial stuff. What we have, though, is we've got all of the original ones. So there's probably about 25,000 being used in India and Nepal. So
are they being used at present?
Yeah. So in the cancer hospitals, because they work. They're there. I can show you some pictures, but they're actually a real thing.
Yeah.
So, but again, it shows you how the media, or the real problem there was that the clinician did a whole lot of things wrong. If you're going to do a clinical trial using somebody's product, you need to talk to them and get an agreement on what the study's going to look like. And none of that was done. He just ran away and just put this. When we saw the pictures of the setup, even the device was upside down. So it was just rubbish. It was just such a bad thing. But again, it was just a disaster from a commercialisation perspective. But the technology is good, and we've got letters from Baxter saying it's all wonderful. So I'm quite comfortable that we didn't try and do anything wrong. But what happened was, this is another thing about the media when they want to get you. They do. Some of them want to do it, and they're just cruel people. Immoral people. Because a good example was Newsroom went on the back of all of this stuff. When we were doing our capital raise for the Acuset, we had done an information memorandum, which is a normal investment document. So our lawyers basically copied a standard governmental MOU, which had certain disclosures. All these disclosure agreements have one caveat, and it's up to the investors to do their own due diligence. So what they do is you publish the whole document and say, we accept no responsibility for the contents of things. It's up to the investors to do the due diligence. And that's in every, investment document. So what happened was Newsroom on the back of that, they were, really committed to ruining this technology. So what happened was we got a notification from the agency that deals with reviewing documents relating to any of these startup, documentation systems. So we got a letter saying they've had a complaint, and they, in regard to the language used in the document, and we don't have a problem with it, but we suggest that you might want to have a look at it. And what had happened is that Newsroom had made a complaint that we were trying to circumvent any responsibility for misrepresentation in the documentation. and we just that document was the same as every startup company. There was nothing dodgy about it. But what they did publish in the public domain was lost the name. Anyway, it's the agency that looks after such things said that we were being investigated by them. And we weren't being investigated. It was Newsroom that put in the query, and that then meant that they wrote to us, and there was no problem as far as we were concerned, or they were concerned. But what happened was, in the media, it suggested that we were trying to promote this thing. To put those two things together, and you've got a terminal problem. So you've got an alleged thing that it doesn't work, and also we're trying to hoodwink the investors. So that's why our board said we've got to just shut it down, because until it all goes away. What we've got now, of course, is that we've got now more data in real life worlds, so we don't have to do a trial with any other muppet. So when they're doing these studies in Nepal and India, what they can do is look at the survival rate of patients on a Acuset versus a normal drip set, and that's going to be very valuable for the future of the product.
How have you been impacted with this kind of business challenge that you just described? I mean, there's heaps of ins and outs and stuff like that, but excuse me, I have to say that question again now. How have you been impacted with all of that? Because it is such a tedious he said, she said, back and forth, almost a bit tiring, really. But how has that impacted you as a person?
Well, I think the problem we had, there was a statement made by Helen Clark following because she took a lot of flack from the general public for shutting down the conference. And so her defence mechanism was, what she had I think a period of about 6 weeks, Newsroom published probably at least 13 to 20 stories, saying everything we were doing was rubbish, and Helen Clark on her posts was republishing one of those ripped things from Newsroom, and said there's more to come. So that would suggest that she was in some way talking to them or wanting to, and I don't know whether she put together a few bob and decided they were going to crucify us. So they also put in 2 complaints to the charity services, suggesting that we were not complying with the charity services things, and we were embezzling money or whatever. And unfortunately, what happened was we got letters from the Commerce Mission saying we've reviewed all the data, there's no evidence of any wrongdoing in both cases. Okay, so we've done nothing wrong. Every penny that we spent was spent on the projects, and there was no dodgy things going on. And that should have been like the end of it, but these things kept coming through, so much so that it affected 2 people in our organisation. One was my wife, Anna, who she was doing most of the fundraising, and I think over probably 8 years, a total salary drawn was about $3,000. So was working for nothing, basically. The second person that was grossly hurt was our financial controller, Hilary Holloway, because she bore the brunt of all these investigations and had to get all the financials together. And Hilary had a mental breakdown, and finally, a complete mental breakdown. She died in a hospice with mental illness problems. So that was a victim. The other victim was my wife, of course, and she had a complete mental breakdown as well, because we couldn't actually believe all this stuff was happening to us. We'd done nothing wrong. It was one of those things, you couldn't win whatever you did. So, for instance, I made a complaint to NetSafe because there was so much bad stuff going on, really directed at hurting us rather than using any science or any logic. So it was a holocaust of these repeated. You can't imagine. I think when I see it now, then I see somebody coming out of court, and I see 16 people with microphones around them. It was a bit like that. So we were coming out the driveway and people would put microphones in front of us. So there was a huge mental problem with the whole family and the whole of our staff.
It sounds like the whole situation is overinflated that you should be, shouldn't it? Like, it shouldn't be that big. Like, what's the big fuss?
Well, I mean, it's this tall poppy syndrome, but I think there was more than that. So in this case, so we made a complaint to NetSafe, and they agreed there was a case to answer. So they went to Newsroom and said, you know, we're happy to be the broker to negotiate how we fix this problem. Now, they don't have any legal power. So Newsroom told them to bugger off and said, we're not going to talk to you. So the next day, Newsroom published a story saying, Sir Ray Avery's case discarded by NetSafe. And it was him that didn't negotiate. It wasn't, you know, we'd made a complaint. They didn't have any way of, you know, any punitive damages or whatever. So NetSafe isn't worth anything at all. But at least we tried to protect our staff. So without hand on heart, I can say absolutely Hillary would still be here if none of that had gone on. My wife probably wouldn't have been living in Australia, so we sent her away to get better with the family, you know. So it did affect us in a whole holocaust of ways. I'm pretty bulletproof in terms of, you know, these things. So we do have a say now, and so every chance we get, we pull up some of this stuff and show this is what happened, you know, and it shouldn't have happened. And it happens, unfortunately, a lot in New Zealand with any, you know, entrepreneurs who fail. Now, we didn't fail, you know, all our technologies are all perfectly sound. It takes a lot of time and money to make a ISO 13485 incubator, and you have to test them in the countries that you're going to be using them in. So India. So, you know, we wouldn't put them into Auckland Hospital until we had validation data from India and da-da-da-da.
Yeah. Gosh.
Yeah, so it could have killed a lot of people, but we had you know, some people in our organisation that were really mentally harmed by that whole.
If entrepreneurs who are listening, or people who are thinking, gosh, if I go through that situation, how do I navigate my way out of it?
Well, you can't if you know, at the time it was so profound that we were getting one news article a day and then another one, and then of course other media people would want commentary and so on. So there's no real, well, particularly if the core information is wrong. So, and that's what's wrong. I think the mainstream media love clickbait media, so they want to have some drama associated with something. So in the case of the Acuset, there was no case to answer because the Acuset worked, and the trial that was done at Auckland University wasn't even on our product. You know, it used a completely different technology complex that they put together on their own. What we did prove was that the setup time was much better for our product than the other one. But that continuous stuff going on. So what you do is you if you're confronted with that stuff, and of course, in the case of Jake Miller, he couldn't, what happened with Jake, he didn't embezzle any money. He had a fire sale because he couldn't travel and get income for the business. So had a fire sale and gave that business, or sold the business to Jamie Beatson. And that was as best that he could come up with, but he didn't do anything wrong. But the NBR reporter said, the money's gone and so is Jake. You need to come back and face the music. And that's really abuse, you see. That's what happened to us. So we've got to get a better media that supports people. So when good old Nano girl, her business, when she basically ended up owing the tax, whatever it was, I don't know, minor amount of money, 220 grand or something. It was, I think even less than that. But once one media agency got hold of that, then there was a shark attack right across, suggesting that she, in some way, she was faulty, and that's what happens. She's done nothing wrong really except be caught, as many other ones do. But she's rebuilding herself in the same way because she's working with the government now to roll out that program. But it did cause her a great amount of emotional angst, and so what I do is I try and protect those people that are still suffering from that kind of thing. But I think you just you either give in, as Jake did, on his own. He ran away, to get away from. In fact, it was a bit like going full circle when I told my friend to go to the teacher and tell him what was happening. And I said to Jake, you need to get out of the country and get away from all this stuff, and just die down. And maybe if but he didn't want to stay in New Zealand because they were just chasing him.
What sort of mindset does an entrepreneur need to have in order to get success and see a project through, especially if they have ideas on what they want to create, especially now with the advent of AI and the possibilities of certain, like you can create anything right now and have AI agents and things like that. What sort of mindset do you need to have to really grit it and get something accomplished?
Well, the first thing to do is any startup is not for the faint-hearted because of it's probably the worst job in the world. And the reality is that, and this is the big picture stuff, is that failure, in whatever that failure looks like, is only a cul-de-sac on the way to success for successful people. So they don't let that thing define them. They learn from that problem. It's a bit like the lathes. We learnt what we had to do to stop them being buggered by the customs people. So, hopefully we came close to a lot of terminal stuff with the newsroom, jihad. But the way to fix that was get my people safe, or as safe as I could. So getting my wife out of the country and getting her away from anything to do with my charities. So she's got her own fashion industry now. And so she's learnt a lot of things about resilience. And she just wants to be... Everything that I do is very challenging on comparison. She makes people look good and makes them happy. What I try and do is, another good example is when I was making lenses for the Fred Hollows Foundation, I set up a division in Adelaide to market these lenses globally, because the manufacturers that were in India and Pakistan and other countries might be seen as third world manufacturers. But if they were sold out of Adelaide and the bills were going into Adelaide, then we'd overcome that problem. And so we did. We had a great business. And the bit that was most important about that was that we would get revenue for the Fred Hollows Foundation in perpetuum, because we would take a small margin on top of every lens that we distributed and put it back into the R&D budget for the foundation. And that way we could do what Fred wanted to do, which was expand the healthcare projects far beyond blindness. And so we had a big exhibition. We had the world expert on intraocular lenses. If you go on and look at a bloke called David Apple, is the word expert, and he said that we had the best lens manufacturing technology he'd ever seen. So brilliant. Mr. Ray did okay. And because we reduced the global price from $360 down to around $10. It's about $5 now. So we broke the cartels and multinational companies, and we were doing a presentation at the big hotel for the International Prevention of Blindness, and we showed the clinical trial results that we had, which showed that our lenses were far superior to all these other manufacturers. And there were two generic IOL manufacturers in the audience, two Indian guys, and they jumped up in the middle of this presentation that one of the ophthalmologists was doing and said, "He's a liar. This trial is not true, and you're a liar." And so these clinicians went back to the foundation and said, "Look, I don't think we should be in the IOL business, because we want to be in the business of fixing people's eyes. So we'll shut down the distribution thing, and we'll just concentrate on fixing people's eyes." So they lost a big opportunity to have ongoing revenue. But on the positive side, I pivoted. So once they shut down the distribution division that we'd set up, which was bringing in revenue, we made the IP open source, so anybody could make it. So that meant that we could have 3 manufacturers in Pakistan distributing in Pakistan, because before we had to have regional offices for distribution and so on. So again, what you do is you will get people throwing in hand grenades in a number of different levels. So the one that was for Newsroom was actually draconian and totally unfair in terms of, we hadn't done anything wrong, despite, it's an odd thing. You can understand why somebody doing one investigation but then doing another one. So there are two separate investigations for the charities services. So it was actually an assassination attempt, really, in a way, and in at least one case it turned out to be exactly that. But there will always be people throwing hand grenades in, and there are a range of people that might do that. There might be the media, they might be your competitors, so they're going to badmouth you anyway because they want to get their share of the market, and they'll say things don't work, And then there's the customers themselves. So there's been a lot of bad feedback for, say, Allbirds, whereby their toes poke through the end of the thing after about 3 months or something because they're made of soft material, and So that's all going to happen. Even successful companies like Rocket Lab. So Rocket Lab is a great inspirational company, But then there's a lot of people who are saying. Now, when they started out, and a lot of investors signed up on the basis that they'd never do any military stuff, and now a large percentage, because the company's now sold and known pretty much by an American company, a large percentage of what they do is now with the military. So, you've got customers that don't like things or whatever, but what you've got to do is make sure that when you go to sleep each night that you're doing a good job, and I go to sleep not so well these days in the sense that, particularly with the domestic violence stuff we're doing, because I feel that it's now my responsibility on behalf of these women to protect them. So I've got to find the money, and that's what I'm doing. I'm going out finding money. And thankfully, we've got great supporters like Ted Manson Foundation and the Bailey's Foundation have just come on board to support us for 3 years. And then we've got Peter Thompson from Barfoot and Thompson. There's another one shortly to be announced. So I think the thing is this, that I think if you are the Wolf of Wall Street and you're a fraud, that you won't survive. But if the people that have been attacking you are not reputable people, then in the long term you win, because people know you, they know you, and you know what you do. The only time people have, sometimes I get introduced to somebody with a philanthropist, and they say, when you shake hands with Ray, you just want to count your fingers because he's probably going to hit you up for some money, and we do, because we do it on behalf of the people that we're trying to look after. But it's also timing. The other important thing for your podcast people is timing. Timing is the thing that's important. So if you look at all these disasters that happen,
why is it good timing?
And these timing issues can be external. So, for instance, nobody foresee what was going to happen with COVID. So there's no way you could predict that. So if you tried to start a business now, you'd profile a different business than you would pre-COVID.
Is it a good time to start a business right now?
Yes, absolutely. It's always a good time. It's like planting a tree. It's always a good time. But
what about the economy and the recession and?
Well, that's where you have that opportunity to do something disruptive and think outside the square. So what are the needs of the people? What could I do to change things and find something? So it might be there's a company that does fruit that basically is not supermarket good, it's just bit gnarly looking, but it's still a great apple, And so they collect all of these fruits from around suppliers, and then they actually set up a business to distribute it to people. And that's happening right now. There's some little mini supermarkets that are cropping up now, because they're beating the supermarkets at their own price by cutting out different parts of the cycle. So you see an opportunity for those things. But a good example of how timing is important is there was a guy who, and there's two things here that's important. One thing is, how do you innovate? What's the magic sauce for innovation?
I wanted to ask you that because you're an innovator, and I want to know, how do you see a need? Is there a framework or a pattern that you look into and can identify things? And I would love to speak into the technology that we have right now, which is AI, and how do we use that to solve a billion people problem?
Well, the first thing is every innovation in the world comes back to one simple word: observation. Observation. I'll give you two examples. There was a hunter in the Swiss Alps, and he was hunting with his dog, and his dog came back, and he had all these little cockleburs, which were the seeds from these little trees, all stuck on his fur, and they were all over his bottoms of his trousers. So he got home, pulled them apart, looked at them under his kid's microscope, and saw these little hooky things like that. And he was the guy that invented velcro. Just observation. There's a guy fishing with the Inuit Indians. They would drill a hole in the ice and they'd whip out the fish, and immediately, because the chill factor was so profound, it would flash freeze that fish. He threw it on the back of the truck and forgot about it. The fall came and it started to melt. He thought, what if he could still eat it? And he cooked it. It was perfect. He didn't. What happened was, his name was Mr. Birdseye, and he invented Birdseye foods, and was flash freezing of foods, and we all use that now. Your freezer's full of stuff that's flash freezed. So he changed the whole way, the supply chain. But what happened was, when he first invented it, there were no fridge freezers. There were cool boxes, that's all there were, and his business went bankrupt. 15 years later, when fridges were now being produced, he had a product market stream, and it was a total success. So timing is important in terms of those things, and the power of observation. Everything that you see is somebody seeing something that everybody sees but nobody acts on, or nobody sees the opportunity. And I've been blessed because when I was in school, when I was at school in England, I learnt nothing because I had a problem with glue ear, so I couldn't hear what the people were saying, and I was short-sighted and nobody checked me to have glasses, so I couldn't read the board and I couldn't hear what they were saying. There's just a bunch of people at the front waving their arms. So eventually they knew that I was retarded and they put me to the back of the class. So I just draw things and just start looking at things. So my only way that I see the world is through observation. So that's what makes me different. I see the world through observation and those opportunities. So for instance, this is a good example. At Agricultural Research College, I was growing tobacco pith cells, which we use for working out how herbicides work, from a single cell in a sterile environment, and I had to use a minimum amount of water to get them the nutrients. So what I would do, I'd draw out all these long strings of hollow tube, and have this tiny little hole at the bottom, connect it up to a little reservoir, and I had a thing called a Cameron drip irrigation. It would just put a spot of water. And from that, I invented the Acuset, because I knew about flow, and I look at flow rates and volumes and how you compress tubing. So it wasn't a big jump. I had something in the tank that knew that it actually works. If you get a piece of tubing and you squeeze it with little fingers like that, it really puts a lot of pressure on the tubing, and eventually it tries to come back out again. But if you gently caress it over a long period of time and slow down, you don't get that cold flow creep. So we solved all these technical problems in a very quick order of time. And so the first prototypes were made in Nepal, and then we got investors to make the product, and we were going to go global on the back of we had global patents, we had endorsement from Baxter UK, USA, and Baxter Vietnam, stating that the product was superior. Nothing could go wrong until Newsroom came along. Of course.
Quick one. Mina here. Thank you for watching this episode. I appreciate you. Thank you for all your support. One thing that you can do for me is to please hit the subscribe button below. I promise you that if you hit subscribe, I'm going to work hard to make sure that my episodes are really good, that will get better and better. So, do we have a deal? Okay, back to the episode. Okay, so when you're thinking about all your awards that we mentioned on earlier, did you at any one point work towards thinking, this is going to get me something? Or were you just doing your own thing and then next minute someone goes, you've got an award for this and you've got an award for that, and you were totally surprised? Like, people like yourselves on that caliber, it's very interesting and fascinating on how you even get to that level. So what was it like? You're working towards the award, or you're working just because you wanted to be an inventor and a philanthropist, and you wanted to do good, and that the world observed you and looked at you and thought, you're so good that we're going to just reward you and recognize you for that?
Well, I don't think I've ever had a master plan in terms of getting awards at all. What I've been, the other important thing about, and I was talking about this today at the Bailey's conference, is to be 100% or 1,000% customer centric. Don't see the world through your eyes, see the world through other people's eyes. And a good example of that was, when I was working in developing countries, and I'd try and learn the cultural respect that was required of different countries. And I think when we, I didn't nominate myself for New Zealand of the Year. And what happened was somebody nominated me, and then I got a note and said, you want to come along to the awards, you may become a New Zealand of the Year. I think the person at that time was Stephen Tyndall, who was,
Stephen Tyndall,
yeah. So he was next, and might have been Valerie Adams, but anyway, there were people that can, possibly going to win. And when it was announced that I'd won, the room erupted, because in the room was about 30 Eritreans dressed in white chadars, and they were so happy for me because of what I'd done for them. And they all started urinating, and there were about another 35 Nepalese people in the room who wanted to come and celebrate that. And I remember John Key was walking through there, and he said, "Where are you guys from?" And he said, "We're with Mr. Ray." And so you don't do it for the recognition. And an artist doesn't paint for the recognition.
Yeah.
They do it because it's who they are. And my job is to be customer centric with my teams. So the most important people in your life are firstly yourself, in terms of understanding what your weaknesses and what your strengths are. And if you get that right, you can reach out and look after other people. So that includes family. And then the next part of the business, most people think that the most important customers in their business are outside the business. The most important ones are actually inside your business. They're your staff. And so what I do with my staff is I always give them a nickname. After a certain time, if they reach the cut, they get a nickname.
Yeah.
And that means there's a personal connection now with me and them.
Right.
And so that gives them power, and that makes them feel that they're loved and respected. So the awards are something that's extraneous to me. I remember going, well, there was, as you know, a proliferation of awards over a period of time. And I remember going to one when I think Rocket Lab was going to be recognised or something. And I remember, the founder, Peter Beck, saying, "You're not for a award, are you, Ray?" And I said, "No, mate, I've done them all. I think I've done them all, But it's humbling, I guess is the right word, to be appreciated. And when I was knighted, got the highest knighthood you can get. Again, other people nominated me. It wasn't me. It was people who. So, for instance, this is another irony. When I was technical director of Douglas Pharmaceuticals, we had a lot of the multinational companies being very upset because we're undercutting them and being more efficient, being customer centric. And they were getting quite upset, and they tried to do a media story. Bless his heart, Graham Douglas was a great friend and mentor. He was a pharmacist, ex-pharmacist, and he set up Douglas Pharmaceuticals. And when we were starting out, we only had about 2 products or 3 products. And so Graham would know that it was important to get product to their customers sooner rather than later. And sometimes he knew some of these pharmacists, so he would actually physically put these boxes in the boot of his car. He had a Jag, and he'd go around and deliver the boxes to the pharmacist. One of the multinational companies got the media on board and suggested that he was doing a sort of bootlegging kind of thing, and he was a dodgy pharmaceutical manufacturer selling stuff out the back of his car. So they tried to, take away his mana by, So again, you're always going to find people who want to, for their own ends, ruin your business, whether they're a competitor or something like that.
What do you define success for you right now?
Being alive. I mean, I've had an incredible life, with all sorts of things going on, I pretty much treated my body like a rental vehicle, because historically. And so what's happening now is because I've got 2 young daughters, I'm taking much better care of myself, because I want to be around for another decade at least, because there's a lot of things I want to close off on before I get out of here. And not the least of which is the family violence stuff, which is, the need for it is just amazing. It's like, every 3 minutes they get a call, and we're getting onboarding. If we have watches, we would onboard about 180 people a week. So it's a big, and what we're doing is upskilling all of the frontline family violence agents. And this segues into AI. What can AI do? So a good example of this is that right now, all of the systems for looking after children are paper-based, and they're not connecting the dots between the frontline family violence agency people and the various agencies that are support agencies. And so AI can do that. I'm setting up a AI program where we'll call it a healthcare passport. And with the help of AI, we can actually come up with a series of questions that can really define what that kid's statement of need is in terms of what he needs to survive and be nurtured. And today I met up with somebody who's working for the Princess Trust, who are going to help us to onboard those kids that we identify are perhaps needing the most support, and also identifying those star players to make sure that if there's any mini-me's in that pack, that they get the best support and mentorship that they can have. So again, that's the thing that I'm paying forwards. I mean, I spend a lot of time with my girls teaching them about life, and they've been brilliant because they're not privileged kids. They've always seen people come into a house from Africa and Asia or whatever. And I remember one of them, when she was about 5 or 6, saying, "Are all black people poor?" And I said, "No, they're not all black people." And one of the best moments, this is what recognition means to me. I was in Nepal, going up, getting a cataract operation on my own eye with one of my lenses. So we're doing a documentary on that. So a lot of these people hadn't seen me for a while, and as we went through the lab, they presented me with a lot of presents and gave me hugs, and some of them cried. My daughter's there and looking at this, and it's the first time she's seen her dad's work up front and close. And so it was very emotional moments with all of this stuff going on. And I cried and everybody cried, and we got in the van to go back to the hotel. My eldest sister, Amelia, leaned forward and punched me on the shoulder and said, "Good on you, bro." And that's the best recognition. I don't need a knighthood. If I get that, and sometimes in Nepal, a woman will come up to me, I don't know her, and she'll know me from the photographs and things. That a lot of the hotels have got photographs of me and the king, So a woman will come in the street and she'll suddenly block my view and stand in front of me and say, "You're God. You saved my son's life and his sight." And so sometimes it's those things that are the thing. And for me, it works the other way around as well. So when I get a call from a family violence agency saying, "We've got these women, or this particular woman who really does need a watch, she's being stalked by," and I haven't got one, so I've now got to get on the boards and find that money sooner rather than later. So I'm hopeful today that we'll raise a fair bit of money through the Baydis conference, and then we've got some other projects that are running. But it is a huge responsibility to be responsible for somebody's life, really. It's not like selling fashion, which is lovely.
Yeah, it's very different.
Yeah.
So I kind of don't want our interview chat, well, it's more like a chat to end, because I almost feel like what will be the next time we're going to have you in the studio. But is there something that is on your heart to talk to people in New Zealand because you have had a lot of experiences, especially for people to New Zealand. What is the message to New Zealanders that you have got in 2025 that is really profound, and you want to speak to them, whether a piece of truth that you've come to realize, to recognize this year, and you think, gosh, I need to get that message up?
Well, I think fundamentally, New Zealand's a very clever country. If you look at some of the things that we've invented, whether it be everything from a hair grip to technology for firing up machines that treat cancer, and a lot of these things are not really much in the public domain. I think the biggest problems we face in New Zealand is to scale. And that's got two factors to it. One is just setting up any business here is very difficult because you've only got a certain customer base. So if you can scale it better in Australia or America, but that's the other good thing. You can use it as a testing base, which is reasonably small, but also adroit. So we do have those benefits to the system. The other problem we have, though, is that it is a small country, and so what happens in a small country is that everybody knows each other. So, and this is where we get the tall poppy syndrome. When I was brought up in the East End of London, there would be terraced houses going on for miles, and they'd all have a front door painted the same colour, and they'd all have net curtains in the windows, and they're all the same. Now, if Mrs. Smith at number 9 suddenly put yellow or floral curtains in, she was up herself, and she would be picked on as a show-off. And so that's we've got a bit of that in New Zealand in terms of the tall poppy culture, in terms of he's showing off too much. I mean, one of Jake Miller's biggest problems was, and it was articulated in one article, he's a dandy, just because he wore Armani suits and stuff like that, So we don't celebrate success in the way that they do in America. So if anybody shows off too much with their showing their Lamborghini, the general population will want to level the playing field and make them feel bad about their success. But we should celebrate success more, and we do have the talent to do that. And I think if you take the mantra that failure occurs through every business, it's just a question of scale. And if you can accept that and get people to support those people, like Nano Girl, and that will help them to get to the next level. Sometimes people don't do anything wrong to fail. If their family business fails. I mean, Smith City's just gone into receivership. They didn't do anything. What happened was COVID shut down a lot of retail, and also we're going through a huge recession, and there's not enough disposable income for people to worry about buying washing machines right now. They'll make do because they need to put food on the table. So the challenges for us are huge in the sense that we are in a recession, but as I said, there's an opportunity then to find some magic sauce around that where, if food is an issue, how can you make food more accessible? And the other, all of this is about, we haven't talked about branding, but branding is very important in terms of a business because it's who you are as an entity. So when we were thinking out brand names, we thought Help at Hand would work because we are helping people with a wearable hand safety device. So we came up with a storyline around that. I'm doing a talk to a company next week about branding, and there was a wonderful thing by a particular chain in the United States, and they admitted they got the branding wrong. So we actually stuffed up. They changed the brand name to something else. Coca-Cola have done it with changing their bottle shape many years ago. So branding is a very important part of convincing people to support your business. And so working out your brand strategy is very much important in terms of who are your customers, how are you going to sell the product to them, and how are you going to make them feel. And ask those questions, because otherwise you'll find out you may not have a customer. I mean, the worst thing that I'd invest in right now is say something like a wine company, because the tariffs that are being imposed on New Zealand wines in the States now can tip the balance in terms of the economy of that that product. Some companies, again, that I know and love are the In Vivo guys, and they've broken into the Australian market. But what they did was they twisted it all, and they got celebrities to get involved. So Jessica Parker, helping to. So there were queues around the block when she's got her own label now as well. So and Graham Norton, who's always a character. So they've got a different way of marketing their product that sets them apart. And so, but you've got to do all that due diligence. There's a guy called Paul who was a very famous podcaster, and he's now a boxer. But he came up with a brand of sort of energy drinks, and it went off gangbusters. Kids were getting it in schools and so on. And but it ultimately failed because there wasn't enough customers who liked that particular product. And that's the thing, trying to read through. But I love all these stories about sometimes this is a good example of resilience. The guy that founded Red Bull in New Zealand went to Europe and tried to get a licensing agreement to market in New Zealand. They told him to bugger off. And he kept going back to the office every day and sat on the same seat. And eventually they invited him to have a chat. But they would only give him the contract if he bought 4 or 5 container loads. So he bought those and put them on his mum's lawn. Yeah. And then he started to distribute them. And then the labelling requirement people pulled him up because he had too much of one particular ingredient in it that didn't meet the New Zealand standards. So basically, he was buggered because they were all tins. You couldn't relabel them easily or whatever, So, but what he did was he put a gold sticker over that bit. And then what was happening in the nightclubs and things, people were taking all the tables were full of these stickers, so they'd buy the stuff and take the sticker off. Oh, look, you've got a bit of juice in here. So what you do is you take your disasters and turn them into successes.
You were saying things that you would probably not invest in right now. What would you invest in right now? What companies? What things that do you see potential in future?
Well, it's everything in the sense that you've got to find, through observation, you've got to find what that is. And it's not even about me giving that advice, but you finding it for yourself, because you're going to have to passion your way through this. You're going to have to actually passion your way through it and put your life on hold until you get the cash flow positive situation. And that's typically 3 years max, or less. It's going to be more than 3 years typically for a lot of companies to actually get cash flow positive. So you've got to have a long bankroll and a long understanding of what can go wrong. And really, we're really at an unprecedented stage in the way that the world's evolving so fast. So right now, the technology that you're using here won't exist in 10 years' time. There'll be something else. Yeah. When I started work in the first laboratory, I had a thing called a fiddle stick. It was called a King fiddle stick, and it was basically to do calculations. There wasn't an automatic calculator at that stage, and so I've seen this whole world change. And now, if you look at even industries like the lighting industry, we used to have candles for years, and then we had gas, and that burnt down half of London, and then we had electricity, the Osram bulbs, which produced more heat than light, and then we had halogen lights, and then we've got all sorts of other innovations that have gone on, and so it's happening so fast. So it's very difficult to, and I wouldn't want to, unless I knew that industry, I wouldn't give somebody advice about that particular industry. So there's a lot of opportunities out there, but what you've got to do is do that observation stuff. What's happening? Where's that ecological niche that I could actually fit into? And what team can I put around myself that are going to actually believe in me and build that team up, and then do your failure mode cause risk analysis to see what you can mitigate. But keep, it's a bit like recovering from the flu. You need to keep taking a pulse and taking your blood pressure as you go through these processes to see where the holes are. There's some wonderful stuff going on in, say, and this is a good example of why you see the opportunities. So there's a wonderful company who's using AI to work with police to stop shoplifting, and it's going gangbusters in
What's it called?
I've lost the name.
Yes.
Anyway.
Is it New Zealand based?
Yeah.
I think I know what you mean.
Yeah.
I can't remember the name.
Yeah.
It's
Anyway.
the guy who...
It's Aurora.
Yes,
Yeah,
Aurora, yeah.
Okay. So it's Aurora, and they're doing a fabulous job. So they saw an ecological niche based on the current situation.
Yeah.
So the, shoplifting is increasing dramatically. There's more organised crimes in it. So that's how you start a business for today, based on what's happening. So even interestingly enough, when the and I love these sort of historic metaphors. When in New York, when there was every companies were going bankrupt overnight, it was a complete collapse of the economy. And the only places that were really functioning and really exciting were all the sleazy joints. They were getting absolutely stoned and legless. And that was a big boom in people in bootlicking. And, so you just got to find those little ecological niches. And there was great examples of that with Xero and people like that. They found a better solution to an average accounting person's problems, and they solved that, and then they were able to scale it. Just did it in New Zealand, and then they could scale it. So
they've already just released their AI agent called Jax.
Right.
And that can automate a lot of the workflows into. They just 2 days ago, and that's where they're forefront of AI and technology, where they want to take a step forward and give more value to their customers. So that's really exciting. And for people who, I experience it myself, but I'm sure lots of people who listen feel that, is a sense of fear about asking for things. I want to find out from you how you, and especially when it comes to asking for investors, for people when to buy into your project, into your venture. For people who have that, a bit of a roadblock almost of, I don't want to ask because they're going to say no, or how do I ask, or where do I even begin, and how do I even show people this is good to buy into? What's your thoughts and what's your advice on that?
Well, the first thing is you've got to be customer centric and say, would be this something that somebody would be interested in? It's the old selling the pen philosophy. How would you sell this pen? So there's a wonderful story about a guy who was in IT, and he brought a computer to the interview with the person and said, "Sell me this computer." So the guy picked up the computer and walked off, and he said, "You can have it back for $2,000. So you pick the customer that you think might be interested in this, and then the next thing you need to do is to actually have a very profound business plan that's more than they may be thinking for in terms of due diligence. So you do the due diligence first. So what can go wrong and what have I done to put in place? Because then they know their money is safe. They put the money in the bank because they hope that the banks are going to be safe. So you need to believe that if I'm investing in the company, so when it's commercial stuff, it's easy in the sense that you've got a return on investment. What we've done with we've done something that most companies don't do when they're in philanthropy. We commissioned Impact Lab to do an independent study on the social return on investment of our technology, and that came out to be roughly $1 invested is 10 times that in terms of reducing. So if we roll out our program to the end of this year, it looks like $47 million worth of saving of ACC funding and all those kind of things. So we do all of that to make sure that we're not we've got something to sell. And then in that space, like Bailey's and another of our, or many other of our sponsors, know that, and this is really good marketing from their perspective, they know that they get their money from customers. So if you can give something back to your customers in the whole community, that makes sense. It is good to be good. And so that's the pitch that we have. We say, look, we've got a social return on investment. This is a good business opportunity. We've got a proven track record with these devices. So all of these agencies write us nice letters saying you've changed the life. Some of them get really emotional in terms of you saved the life of this woman, We're also doing a number of webinars connecting all of the agencies that we're working with for their stories, because you must constantly in your business do lessons learnt. What are the lessons we've learnt this year? Babies are doing that right now. So what are the lessons learnt? Because they've gone through this whole problem of the recession and now they're climbing out of it, but only because they keep having a look at the business and how they can benefit from things. One of the nice things I saw today when they had a slide up, they said, we're not an AI company, we're a customer company which uses AI. And that's a very important thing in terms of what we do with AI. I'm thankful for all kinds of IO and spell check and IA and spell check, because I'm dyslexic, so I get it close enough and they fix it for me. But I'm also annoyed because it doesn't really know what I want to say. But you can use everything that I've done has been based on technology for good, because of my basic training and a whole range of business. So when I did all the formulations for EcoStore to rebrand their EcoStore brand, because they wanted to have a product that was safe for us and the environment. And so my philosophy when I did the deal was to say, I'll only do it as long as we fit two critical criteria. One is we use the most environmentally sound raw materials, and we use the minimum number of raw materials that will get the job done. And we did. So we won a prize for a window cleaner that only had 3 ingredients. One was water. And so that was my trick. I wanted to have a storyboard, but also use good science, good technology to, get customers who, and most of the people that buy their product, of course, are greenies, so they love all of that stuff,
What's your sort of final thoughts, I suppose, with our entrepreneurial listeners and viewers?
Well, I think the most important thing is to look after each other, whatever you're doing, whatever it is. And I think when I look at the world at large, it's a complete madness. There's probably more people being killed today than there was in the Second World War, with all the conflicts that we've got across the world. And they're due to sectarian differences and racial differences and so on. We are one species, and if we learn to work together and look after each other, we can make this the best place to live on the planet, and the best planet in terms of its durability. And that starts with all of us, So my simple philosophy to all of you before you even get out of bed is to say, what good am I going to do today?
That's a good question to ask.
And then you look at yourself in the mirror and say, what can I do to make the world a better place than I found it?
I'm going to start asking that question now. So Ray Avery, it's been an absolute pleasure and honour to have you on the podcast. Thank you for making time, and we're so lucky that we got the chance to chat and listening to your stories and wisdom and insights. So until next time, all the best to you. If people want to reach out or learn more about your recent project, which is...
well, you can go online and look for helpathand.org.nz, and if you want to, help in any way, that would be wonderful. It's a wonderful country, New Zealand, but we've also got some terrible statistics in terms of the highest rate of family violence in the developed world and the highest rate of child suicide rates. We've got a lot of work to do to make this the best place in the world to bring up children. I'm making a big impact on that. We're reducing some of those figures by 90%. And in terms of all the awards, I'm just happy to rub my chest and say I've done that. I've actually got some technology that's cool, that is making a difference. And my happiness comes from seeing those women that, and you'll see more of that. So we're going to do some more podcasts with the actual victims themselves. And that's really inspirational. That changes their lives, that they can go back to work and their children can go back to school and feel safe when they're walking around in the community. So that's what I'm doing that, and then I'm reversing back to some of the other projects once we get this finished. But as I said to one of my major sponsors, I know. I used to say this is the other thing about life, is you need to plan your life. We don't plan our life at all. Probably at birth, you've got 3,650 days left to live. It's not a lot. And so most people get to the end of their checkbook and think about the things they wanted to do, or the career that they might have wanted to have. But if you reverse engineer it and say, how do I want to be remembered? And then work backwards from that. So I've only probably got 10,000 days left to live if you follow the demographics of somebody my age drinking the amount of wine I do. Then I've got to make the use of those days. So I've cheated it by doing two things. One is not sleeping as much, because I can actually get another year out of my life. And the other one is by using the right-hand side of my brain, which is, we only use the left-hand side of our brain in terms of the way we see the world, and it's usually through a negative narrative. But if you start to turn it around and say, what can I do, and how can I dance across the lake, even though people tell me I can't.
I love that. Thank you for that. Such beautiful last words. And yeah, all the best to you. And I wish you all the success in your adventures to come.
Thank you so much. Good time together.